Dear you. Your mind didn't stop when the day ended. That was the first thing you noticed. Even when everything around you grew quiet, lights dimmed, conversations ended. Notifications slowed, something inside you stayed alert. Thoughts kept circling, returning to the same places again and again, like they were afraid to leave something unfinished. You weren't anxious in a way that felt dramatic. You weren't panicking. You were thinking constantly. You replayed conversations long after they ended. You wondered if you'd said the wrong thing, if your tone had been misunderstood, if you should have explained yourself better. You imagined different versions of the same moment, different outcomes, different reactions, not because you wanted to change the past, but because your mind refused to let it settle. You told yourself this was just reflection. You told yourself you were being thoughtful. You told yourself this was how responsible people lived. And maybe, at first, it was overthinking started as a way to protect yourself. You learned that anticipating problems reduced surprises, that replaying situations helped you avoid mistakes next time, that staying mentally prepared felt safer than letting things unfold on their own. So you stayed alert, mentally scanning for anything you might have missed. But over time, alertness turned into habit. You noticed it most at night, when there was nothing left to do, no one left to respond to, no task demanding your focus. Your body wanted rest, but your mind kept working, stitching together moments from the day, the week, the past. You thought about what you should have done differently. You thought about what might go wrong tomorrow. You thought about things that hadn't happened yet, but felt urgent anyway. You didn't choose these thoughts consciously. They arrived automatically, one after another, filling the quiet space. And because they felt important, you followed them. You assumed if you thought long enough, you'd reach clarity, resolution, peace. But clarity never came. Instead, you felt tired in a way that rest didn't fix. You felt mentally crowded, like there was no space inside you to simply exist. Even moments of calm felt occupied. Your mind treated stillness as an invitation to review everything all over again. You didn't talk about this much. You assumed everyone's mind worked this way. You assumed this was normal adulthood, constantly evaluating, planning, adjusting. You didn't think of it as overthinking. You thought of it as being careful. But careful has a cost. You noticed how difficult it became to be present. How often you were physically somewhere while mentally somewhere else. How rarely you felt fully settled in a moment without immediately analyzing it. Even happiness felt temporary because your mind rushed ahead to consider what might disrupt it. You didn't feel broken. You felt restless in a way that didn't show on the outside. You still listened, you still responded, you still smiled at the right moments. But inside, your thoughts were rarely quiet. And that constant mental noise left little room for rest. You wondered if this meant something was wrong with you, if you were too sensitive, too self-aware, too concerned with getting things right. You told yourself to relax, but relaxation felt impossible when your mind wouldn't slow down. If you're reading this and feeling that immediate recognition, the sense that these words are describing something very familiar, it's because many people live this way. They don't overthink because they want to. They overthink because they've learned that vigilance feels safer than ease. You weren't weak for this. You weren't failing at calm. You were trying to protect yourself in a world that felt unpredictable. This letter isn't here to tell you to stop thinking. It's here to acknowledge how exhausting it is to never fully rest inside your own mind. To sit with you in the recognition that the constant analysis you've been carrying didn't come from nowhere. It came from care, from caution, from wanting to do things right. But wanting to do things right doesn't mean you have to carry every thought to its end. Something inside you is tired of running mental loops. Something inside you wants quiet, not silence, but relief. And noticing that is the beginning of change. If you sit with this pattern long enough, you may begin to realize that your overthinking never came from emptiness. It came from care, from attention, from a deep desire to understand, to avoid harm, to get things right. You didn't start thinking this way because you were broken. You started because, at some point, thinking became the safest option you had. There was a time when reacting impulsively didn't feel safe. There was a time when being unprepared had consequences. There was a time when misunderstanding cost you something real. So you learned to think ahead. You learned to rehearse conversations before having them, to replay moments afterward to see what you might have missed, to imagine outcomes before making choices. Your mind became a place where you tried to solve problems before they could exist. And for a while, this worked. It helped you feel in control. It helped you feel prepared. It helped you avoid surprises. But control slowly turned into vigilance. You stopped trusting that things could unfold without your constant involvement. You began to believe quietly, without realizing it, that if you didn't think everything through, something bad might slip past you. So you stayed mentally alert, even when your body needed rest. Overthinking became a form of self-protection. You weren't trying to torture yourself. You were trying to keep yourself safe. Your mind learned that if it stayed busy, it could prevent mistakes. If it stayed active, it could anticipate rejection. If it stayed engaged, it could avoid regret. Thinking became armor, and armor is heavy when worn all the time. You might have noticed that your thoughts often circle around the same themes: social moments, decisions, the possibility of being misunderstood. These aren't random obsessions. They point to something deeper, a fear of misalignment, a fear of doing the wrong thing, a fear of being seen incorrectly. You care deeply about how you show up. You care about impact. You care about meaning. And when you care deeply, your mind tries to help by analyzing everything. But analysis doesn't always lead to clarity. Often, it leads to more questions, more hypothetical outcomes. Your thoughts don't move forward in a straight line. They loop. And loops don't resolve. They exhaust. You may have wondered why reassurance never lasts. Why even when someone tells you everything is fine, your mind finds a way to question it. This isn't because you don't trust people. It's because you've learned to trust your thinking more than your feelings. Feelings feel uncertain. Thoughts feel solid. So you default to thoughts. Your past self understands now that this habit also grew from emotional responsibility. You learned to monitor yourself closely, to make sure you weren't too much, too quiet, too intense, too distant. You became your own observer, constantly checking whether you were doing things right. And when you live under that internal observation, rest becomes difficult. Even joy feels fragile because your mind is already preparing for what might disrupt it. Overthinking isn't the absence of peace. It's the search for it. A search that has gone on too long without rest. This doesn't mean you need to stop thinking altogether. Your mind is intelligent, perceptive, capable of nuance. Those are strengths. The issue isn't that you think deeply. It's that you don't know when to stop. And learning when to stop isn't about force. It's about trust. Trusting that not every thought deserves your attention. Trusting that you don't have to resolve everything immediately. Trusting that some things can exist without being analyzed to exhaustion. Your past self sees now that the constant thinking was a signal, not a flaw. A signal that something inside you wanted safety, reassurance, grounding. And your mind did its best to provide that on its own. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. Understanding why you overthink is the first step towards softening it, not eliminating it, not fighting it, but loosening its grip. Allowing space between thoughts. Allowing moments where you don't have to follow every mental thread to the end. You don't need to punish your mind for trying to help. You can thank it and gently guide it to rest. And that possibility begins to open now. I want to ask you to stop for a moment, not to fix anything, not to figure anything out, just to stop following the next thought that appears. Let it pass without chasing it. Let the silence stretch a little longer than usual. You might feel uncomfortable at first, like you're forgetting something important. That feeling is familiar, isn't it? That's the feeling of not controlling everything. You've spent so long believing that thinking harder would keep you safe, that if you stayed alert, nothing would catch you off guard, that if you analyzed every possibility, you could avoid regret. And for a while, that belief helped you survive. It gave you a sense of structure in moments that felt uncertain. But now, it's costing you peace. You don't need to think your way into calm. You don't need to solve yourself. You don't need to reach the end of every mental thread. Peace doesn't arrive as an answer. It arrives as permission. Permission to not know everything. Permission to let moments be unfinished. Permission to trust that you can handle what comes when it comes. You are allowed to rest inside uncertainty. You are allowed to exist without rehearsing the future or rewriting the past. Nothing bad happens when you loosen your grip despite what your mind has been telling you for years. Your thoughts are not commands. They are not prophecies. They are not emergencies. They are signals, and you can learn to listen without obeying every one of them. You don't have to force your mind into silence. Silence isn't the goal. Space is space between you and your thoughts. Space where you can notice them without becoming them. Space where your body can finally feel like it's allowed to settle. Start small. When a thought loops, acknowledge it without judgment. When your mind rushes ahead, gently bring it back. When you feel the urge to analyze, ask yourself whether you actually need an answer right now. Sometimes the most powerful response is not now. You may worry that if you stop overthinking, you'll become careless, that you'll miss something important, that you'll lose control. But control isn't the same as safety. And safety doesn't require constant vigilance. It requires trust in yourself. Trust in your ability to respond. Trust that you don't have to pre-live every possible outcome. You have handled things before. You will handle things again. You don't need to exhaust yourself in advance. If you're reading this and feeling a subtle easing, like a knot loosening just slightly, that's not coincidence. That's your nervous system recognizing something true. You don't need to be on guard all the time. You don't need to prove your worth through constant thinking. You don't need to earn rest by reaching perfect clarity. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to breathe without explanation. You are allowed to let today be unfinished. Over time, as you practice stepping out of your thoughts instead of deeper into them, something shifts. The noise doesn't disappear, but it softens. The urgency fades. The space inside you grows. And in that space, you begin to feel something you may have missed for a long time. Grounded, present, safe enough. You don't need to become someone new to feel this way. You just need to stop believing that peace lives at the end of a thought spiral. It doesn't. It lives here, in the moment where you choose not to follow. Stay with that choice for a breath. Then another. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not failing at calm. You are learning how to rest inside your own mind. And that is a skill worth practicing, gently, patiently, without pressure. You've been thinking for so long. Now you're allowed to be sincerely you.